Sammy Kovnat is an internationally shown multimedia artist and muralist living and working in Philadelphia. They received their BFA in fine art from Rowan University in 2016. Sammy has worked on over 30 murals in Philadelphia and prides himself on sharing the skills they have learned while working in public art for the last 7 years. They're passionate about expressing warmth, connection, and vulnerability through a variety of mediums, especially murals, mosaic, and collage. And I think people know that Sammy was featured in the New York Times. So that's pretty exciting. So we're very lucky and excited to welcome Sammy.
Thank you so much for having me. All right, so my name is Sammy Kovnat, or SKOVeS, and this presentation is really centered around the last decade in which I have been producing mosaics as a form of healing. I'm a mosaic artist, a muralist, and a public art enthusiast. I was born in Philadelphia to two Philly parents, raised in South Jersey, and I went to college at Rowan University. My father taught photo at my old high school. So as a kid, I grew up doing Bring Your Kid to Work Day in the art department. And so I learned when I was little how to make mosaics. And the ones that I made when I was little were like just messing around, and it was always, tile on wood. When I was in high school, I then took a sculpture class and learned how to do mosaic. And the way that I produce mosaic now is informed by the way that I learned when I was in high school in like maybe 2010. So when I was at Rowan University, I studied sculpture and printmaking and jewelry and metals. And I was always really interested in mixed media, but also trying to explore how to say these big things that I was feeling in different mediums. And I think I was really driven by like concept over material. So in 2014, I was at a place in my life where I felt like there were lots of things that were wrong, or things that upset me, or spaces in my life in which I felt like my voice didn't matter. Because if I brought things up, then I was a shitster, or I was this person that was responsible for like spilling the apple cart, right? Everybody was happy, pretending things were fine. And I think that some of that stemmed from my family life, some of that stemmed from interpersonal relationships. And I started to try and explore that kind of like internal pressurization that happens when there's emotionally complex situations that nobody is addressing. So, this idea I started exploring in photography. This photograph was a test shot that I took for a side project that I explored a little bit called Things Better Left Unsaid. And that is kind of the seed of where my mosaic work started. I was really thinking about interior spaces and the way that you can feel silenced or like wallpaper. Uh, I'm half Italian, half Jewish. My Italian grandmother grew up like Cinderella, and she married a man that you know, wanted basically her to be his mother, and she really had so little agency and voice in her life, and there was such a silence to her. And that's something that I really was thinking about a lot in college, and a lot in those moments where I felt silenced and that mirroring. um, and so in these photographs and in these spaces, I really just started to feel angry, and I was trying to explore rage in interior spaces. And so I was exploring that initially with like photography. And so I had a series, there's like two photographs. There's this one, which was And No Sound Came Out, and another one, which was titled Words Are Never Enough. And when I tried to even take these photographs, I essentially bent over backwards to be accommodating and make people feel comfortable. So I didn't even actually scream, I silent screamed because I knew if I took photographs in the photo studio in my college and I screamed, people would think there was something wrong. And so I started thinking about this idea that if you scream, it almost is an inconvenience and people just want you to stop and know that you're okay, but do they actually want to know if you're okay? And when I was really sitting with that and ruminating, it made me realize that in the home, when you scream, everybody has to stop and they're like, oh shit, what's wrong? And then, they just want it to stop and go away. And I was realizing that the same reaction, the thing that creates the same reaction is the sound of a plate breaking. It's a siren. It's an alarm that there is something wrong, and then immediately everything freezes and the cloud of shame goes up in the air, and we have to sort of stop what we're doing. Maybe we're allowed to help sweep it up, but then it has to disappear. And so I started thinking about that as an action of breaking things, but then finding agency and rebuilding it. And so I did a performance piece December 20th, 2014, in which I broke 70 plus plates in the upstairs gallery at the college. I did it the first day of finals, and I did it at 9 a.m. so that it was in its own way disruptive. There were people that were taking um, their finals at that time, and there were a few complaints filed, but I think that it was really important to do it in such a way that it was disruptive because I had already twisted myself into a pretzel knot to be non-disruptive for people, and I think that that was not healthy. So this is sort of a look at what the space was in the rest of the gallery. I had sentiments written on the walls. The plates speak for themselves. They speak for me. I had two different canvases with screen printed plates on them that had these two different sentiments on them. And I think that really I was trying to find a way to express my rage that I don't think that I learned how to express being socialized as a woman and coming from a line of women that freeze when people start yelling or something is wrong. And so I was trying to take up space. And these are some stills from video documentation. I put it into a video that is not truly watchable, but it's really nice to be able to look at. And so you can sort of see that the shards exploding out and then becoming this mountain, this weight. At the end of it, my professor asked me, what are you going to do with all the plate shards? And I said, I don't know. And he said, have you ever mosaiced before? And I said, yeah, in high school. And he's like, you need to make a mosaic. And I was like, okay. So I was thinking about, I destroyed all of these. So now it is my duty to mend it and try and fix what I had destroyed. I was like, well, how big should I make it? He said, make it as big as humanly possible for you. So I cut out a base from wood that was 4 feet in diameter, and I tried to reconstruct a plate. And so what I did was I used the center of the plates that were white, that had the labels, and I put them all in the center. And then I used the edges of the plates around the edge of the piece. And it was my way of trying to find healing in the aftermath of me being allowed to express rage. So that piece is titled What I Broke / What I Built. And this is currently hanging in my parents' house. um, and so that sort of kick-started my mosaic work. The older pieces, I really tried to use as many mosaic plate shards as I could, and they are very jagged. If you tried to run your hand along it, you would absolutely cut yourself probably. Um, and then in 2016, I graduated college. I was very busy doing other things that year and I didn't make any mosaics. In 2017, I moved to Philadelphia and I lost access to a studio space and that creative environment. And so I didn't know if I'd be able to continue to make mosaics, even though I really loved it. And even though it felt like something that was really meditative and cathartic to me. Um, until 2017, when my sister asked me to make two small pieces that she could use in her arts administration program that she was at the time to like give a little presentation. And I was like, okay, yeah, an opportunity to have a reason to make more because I didn't know if I make this, will it just sit around, right? So I used leftover shards from the original performance in two pieces, and they're 12 inches by 12 inches. And so you can see that scale in 2017 having this 12-inch piece and this 4 feet piece. And from there, I slowly but surely, with time, produced more mosaics, but they were specifically commissions because I was working out of my house. My uncle and aunt let me use their wood shop. So I was able to cut my bases and do that, like the wood preparatory stuff there. But I would make stuff and then it would go out. This was a commission for my cousin using a lot of different plates, but heavily featured are my grandmother's plates. So these early commissions that I was doing were really utilizing plates that were symbolic to people's lives. This one was a set of 3 mosaics utilizing my roommate at the time's grandmother, her china that had these yellow crocuses. And so it was a set of 3 with the yellow crocus in each and then an alternate plate to complement it. And so these pieces were really based on commissions, based on inquiry, and it was slowly helping me build up sort of this language because I was making this work because it felt good and because I loved it. But I don't know if I understood everything that I was doing, and I absolutely couldn't talk about it without crying. um, in 2018, because I'm like a sensitive, intuitive person that really thinks about and absorbs the energy around me in the world, I made this piece and it's about politics. There was a Betsy Ross plate that I like folded into there that had some like patriotic imagery. And this was the first piece that I used that incorporated mirror. And I started thinking about in my art history classes, mirrors are always featured as a nod to reflection. And so I was thinking about the ways that if I'm breaking these things and I'm mending these things, the use of mirror is like a secondary nod to pulling in reflection into them. So this is another commission utilizing my aunt's mother-in-law's plates and again mirror. And so you can sort of see in this work the way that I'm like exploring and experimenting with being commissioned to make things and then playing with it more. On the left is a piece that I utilized my friend's grandmother's thimble collection. And so these are all thimbles. And then it is essentially like a sculptural assemblage around it that's wood. And this is all work before 2020. Really, they were like one off that I was putting out into the world. In 2020, I got a studio. And so with that came more opportunities to create an inventory and really expand on this work and find new opportunities to kind of do more and also create at a higher scale. This is a shot of me working on mosaics for the airport in 2022. I was commissioned to do a set of 33. At the time, I had only made 26 mosaics ever from 2015 to 2022. And so in the span of like 4 months, I completely doubled and then some the number that I had ever made. And it was an amazing opportunity to learn how to ramp up my production. You can see in the background just all of these mosaic bases and different levels of completion. I love organized chaos and I love tiny piles. This is a photograph of the exhibition in the airport. So you can sort of see what a lot of my work looks like next to each other. I had never had that opportunity until the airport exhibition. So much of this and like my mosaic journey has been figuring out how to find my voice within the stories that I'm telling about healing and how to better communicate what these objects mean to me, what the notion of finding agency and healing looks and feels like, and really thinking about how to help people ruminate on the things that we hold on to in our lives that maybe are seeds of shame, and how do we loosen the like knots that that shame has over the way that we can and can't talk about these things and use Mosaic as a vehicle for that. Here's some photographs of some of the pieces that were in that exhibition. And then after that, I started playing more. I wanted to try and like expand beyond just the circle, like the circle mosaic, because I felt like I had really ran with that so far. So this is a piece that was a commission inspired by vintage serving trays. So I still utilize the sort of raised edge mosaic technique that I use in most of my mosaics, just around the edge here. But I'm exploring trying to do a little bit more flat stuff, and mostly because grouting stuff on the raised edge is really physically demanding. So thinking of ways that I can make mosaics that are flat, it's just easier to grout and it moves faster. This is another commission that I did that, yes, is still circular, but it's experimenting more with layers and sort of tiers and heights. And so as I was sort of starting to play more, a lot of these experiments led to my show that I had at the Da Vinci Art Alliance in November, which was a lot more new work that was experimental. But this also led to me thinking about how I can take these themes that I create mosaics with, like, and how do I merge that with murals, which, I have been working on murals since 2017. I'm in my 8th year. I've worked on over 40 murals in Philadelphia. I've worked on murals in Greece. I haven't had that many opportunities to tell my own stories and explore ways to merge these art forms and themes. And so in 2023, I was approached with the opportunity to create a mural inspired by whatever I wanted, which in Philadelphia is really rare because our mural scene is heavily influenced by community murals, which I think is absolutely beautiful and really important. And it speaks to the way that people in Philly do have a bit more agency over the stories that show up on our walls and in our like public art gallery. But I think sometimes there's a space where we're almost like starved for these tiny little individual bursts of just individual artists telling their stories, maybe in an abstract way, maybe in a representational way. But I think even in seeing those stories on a grand scale, people can still connect to them and find joy in it as well. So this piece I designed and got approved in September 2023. Took 8 months to find a wall, and eventually we did on Montrose Street. And it was completed August 31st, 2024. And so this piece is about family and identity and intergenerational stories and intergenerational trauma. This is a love letter to my grandfather, who I'm named after. So I've lived my life as a namesake. And one of the ways that you can do murals is there is like direct painting where you're painting directly on the wall, but in Philadelphia, we predominantly will do painting on mural cloth. So we take a design, we turn it into a grid, and then we paint those individual squares onto a material called mural cloth. And then we install it on site. We hang it like wallpaper. What I realized is that my grandfather, who I'm named after, was a wallpaper hanger in Philadelphia. He started the National Wallpaper Hangers Guild. And this action of installing murals was almost as though I am living I'm doing these gestures and movements that he did. And so this piece is paying homage to the ways that even if we don't intend to, the stories of the people that have come before us end up showing up in our lives. And that feels so so close to intergenerational trauma and how we have to like understand and move through that in order to kind of find a new path for ourselves. It was featured in the New York Times in 2024. This is a photograph of the article, and you can sort of see that, which was really exciting. And this is my grandfather, who I'm named after, and my grandmother, and my father and uncle, who my uncle was a lifelong paper hanger, and my dad helped him. And so it became this love letter to family and to thinking about the way that fractured relationships, fractured China, fractured ties can potentially find healing and mending in a public space. It is sort of my love letter to Philadelphia. So that's like the last 10 years, very much so abridged in terms of thinking about my mosaic work and my murals, finding these sort of ties together. In a lot of ways, I think this is sort of the start of many different directions I could go into, but it's really exciting to be here to talk about and reflect and directly create those ties. It's always nice to have opportunities like this because otherwise you're working in a vacuum or you're working and you don't always see the little threads connecting everything.
Thank you so much, Sammy.
I just want to jump in with a very quick question.
Yes.
At the show at the Da Vinci Art Alliance, I was struck by the shapes of your pieces. And so what you showed us were all on circles, but at Da Vinci, they were actually mirroring the pieces. Can you explain how you got to those unique shapes?
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about how to like push the circle even more and thinking about the ways that when a plate breaks, there's all these shards and you kind of have to sweep them up and make them disappear. And I was really thinking about how sometimes those shards feel symbolic of like these moments in our lives that have fractured us. And then there's just this like mountain of plate shards. And I think it can feel intimidating to touch one and to hold it up and feel like, no, it's okay, it's safe to touch. Especially because, like, if you're a little kid and you break something, it's like, oh no, it's dangerous. It's sharp. We can't, don't look at this anymore. It's not beautiful. It's ugly, right? If it no longer holds its utilitarian purpose, it should be discarded. And I think the idea of taking these individual plate shards and emphasizing them and putting people in a position of sort of celebrating and highlighting and sitting with even just the shape of the shard felt really important to me and also like an interesting way to kind of um push the imagery that I like love so dearly and I think so much about into another space. I felt like I probably wouldn't have had enough time to really talk about where my mosaic work started and then how it has taken this journey, ending up on a big mural to also include photographs of the show. But
We'll have to have you back another time in order to share that with you. A lot of the comments when you were talking, people really related to your sentiments of healing and dealing with feelings in your use of mosaics. You know, a lot of people talked about how it was a meditative experience for them also. So they really identified with the same emotions that you expressed in them. Somebody wanted to know why pomegranates on the Montrose Street mural.
so I didn't break down all the imagery on the Montrose Street mural just because time, but so that is a love letter to my grandfather who I'm named after. That's my Jewish side. Uh, the original story of Adam and Eve was not an apple, it was a pomegranate. I think in Judaism, it's like it's a symbol that feels also really closely related to like blood and fertility and family and femininity. And so I wanted to create a wallpaper pattern that's a nod to my grandfather's use of wallpaper but also felt like something that was a nod to something old and like a nod to generations and like generational imagery and stories. I did also peek in the chat and somebody asked about the black ribbon. And the black ribbon is like symbolic to the way that I think that the black ribbon really symbolizes grief, and it symbolizes intergenerational grief in the way that I think definitely in Jewish culture, but also I think many cultures around the world really think so much about the past and the pains of the past that it can often blind us to the present. And I think intergenerational trauma does that in general. It puts this goggle and lens on the way that we view so much of what is currently happening to us. And I think there's a space where that can be positive because it's informed, but I also think that it can, in some ways, blind us from experiencing the present in a way that doesn't always have weight of the past. And so the black ribbon is a nod to that.
Thank you so much. Oh,
Yeah.
love your art. Everybody was like really interested in your use and how you tied your emotions into the expression through mosaics.
Thank you. I think it's really cool. It's so interesting the way that so many people have so many different approaches to mosaic. And like whenever anybody does things that are very representational, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But like that would hurt my brain. Like I have to mosaic from a space of it feeling intuitive and having my like rough infrastructure plan and then just kind of doing jazz, because otherwise when I'm too rigid I don't get the relief in my brain. Sometimes when you hyper focus and make stuff that is like really crispy and representational, like the results are amazing and it's so beautiful. So it's cool to hear about the different journeys and different approaches to mosaic imagery.
It definitely is. And people are continuing to comment in the chat and thanking you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.